This Sunday is always a little bit fun. I always tell my kids it's my one talk of the year that I do. So you get to listen to me once a year. I appreciate that you're patient with me with that. Our men are having a great time. Pastor Dan and I have been texting back and forth, and he said it's been going really great. I don't know if any of you saw our young adult men throwing cold water on each other in the shower on Facebook. That's kind of a tradition they have, is they're always pranking each other while they're there. But our older men are having a great time too. And they're coming back today, so please pray for them. Here the roads aren't great, so I'm sure Cypress Hills to here will also not be great, so pray for them as they're driving. One thing that always amazes me about this Sunday is, all our pastors are away, and so many people just jump in and make this Sunday happen. And I just want to thank them. It blows me away every time, every year I get here, and I see everybody I'm like, oh, what about that? What about that? And by the time I think of it, it's usually done. And so I just want to thank the whole team. You guys are amazing. I'm thankful to all of you for this. You've been sitting for a while, so let's stand to pray, and then we'll get into the message. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to study your word together. And I pray that as we look into your word, that you would speak to us, that you would help us to hear the little nugget that each one of us needs this morning. And I pray that none of us would walk away without anything, but that we would all hear something from you directly to us this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. You can be seated. We're a quiet bunch this morning. Has the snow gotten into our bones, maybe? I know we've gone through about a whole thing of hot chocolate in the last few days. Anyone else? Lots of hot drinks. Okay, I've called this talk What the Worship Team Would Love to Tell You, just to be a little different. And I want to thank my son, Joel. I sat down at 10 o'clock last night to make the PowerPoint, and I thought, this is going to take me 3 hours. And Joel and Michaela could do it in half an hour. So I'm going to wait for the morning. And so I got them here this morning, and I said, hey, guys, here's my computer. Here's my notes. Please make me a PowerPoint. And so they did. So thank you guys very much. This actually is the story of the church volunteer. We've been talking a lot about our volunteers. We've had volunteer gifts a little while ago. We've had flyers in the bulletin for children's ministry. And so this morning I want to tell you the story of our church volunteer. I'm going to frame it within the worship team. I know some of you are thinking, why the worship team? And that's simply because that's where I volunteer. That's my frame of reference. I get to serve as the coach of the team, and I also play sometimes. And so this is just where I volunteer. So it's easiest for me to tell the story from that frame of reference because that's the place I get to serve. So it does apply to all of our volunteers, though. So try to hear it more broadly. But we are going to be focusing specifically on the worship team. We're going to be looking at 1 Corinthians 12, which symbolizes the church with the portrait of our body. So if you have a Bible, you can turn there with me. I'm going to read most of the chapter, actually. I'll skip around a little bit, but it's also good that it was hard to pick what to leave out. So 1 Corinthians 12, I'm going to start in verse 4. It says, God's various gifts are handed out everywhere, but they all originate in God's Spirit. God's various ministries are carried out everywhere, but they all originate in God's Spirit. I'm reading from the Message translation, sorry. God's various expressions of power are in action everywhere, but God himself is behind it all. Each person is given something to do that shows who God is. Everyone gets in on it, and everyone benefits. All kinds of things are handed out by the Spirit, and to all kinds of people. The variety is wonderful. And then he gives a list of different kinds of gifts. I'm going to skip down to the next part, which says, all these gifts have a common origin, but are handed out one by the one Spirit of God. He decides who gets what and when. You can easily enough see how this kind of thing works by looking no farther than your own body. Your body has many parts, limbs, organs, and cells, but no matter how many parts you can name, you're still one body. It's exactly the same with Christ. By means of his one Spirit, we all said goodbye to our partial and piecemeal lives. We each used to independently call our own shots, but then we entered into a large and integrated life in which he has the final say in everything. This is what we proclaimed in word and action when we were baptized. Each of us is now a part of his resurrection body, refreshed and sustained at one fountain, his Spirit, where we all come to drink. I want you to think about how all this makes you more significant and not less. A body isn't just a single part blown up into something huge. It's all the different but similar parts arranged and functioning together. I'm going to skip down to verse 19. It says, "As it is, we see that God has carefully placed each part of the body right where he wanted it. But I also want you to think about how this keeps your significance from getting blown up into self-importance. For no matter how significant you are, it is only because of what you are a part of. An enormous eye or a gigantic hand wouldn't be a body, but a monster. What we have is one body with many parts, each its proper size and in its proper place. No part is important on its own. Can you imagine eye telling hand, get lost, I don't need you? Or head telling foot, you're fired, your job has been phased out." And then down to verse 25. "The way Godard designed our bodies is a model for understanding our lives together as a church, every part dependent on every other part, the parts we mention and the parts we don't, the parts we see and the parts we don't. If one part hurts, every other part is involved in the hurt and in the healing. If one part flourishes, every other part enters into the exuberance. That you are Christ's body. That's who you are. You must never forget this. Only as you accept your part of the body does your part mean anything." You know, if anybody has stubbed their toe, you know that your toe is not very separate from the rest of your body. Anyone with me? And it's the same in the church. Every single one of us has a part to play. Some of us are the toes, some of us are the eyes, some of us are the hands. And the worship team, we kind of see ourselves as the mouth, if you will, I guess, or the tongue. That's just the part that we've been given to play. I want to talk for a minute about the word story. The word story is really important to me. God is a God of story, and I see history as one huge sweeping narrative of what is happening on this planet. The Bible is simply the story of what God's doing. Have you ever noticed when you're reading the Bible that God never hires anybody to do his work? Anyone notice that? You know, he never works through an employee or a mercenary. You know, every single person in the Bible is a volunteer. And each story includes a volunteer. Everywhere there's volunteers. Story after story after story of them. And I think so many of us tend to read the Bible as a textbook, but God wrote it as a novel. It's a big sweeping novel of his love. And he wired us for story, and he wired us to volunteer. Nothing touches the deepest part of our souls like a good story. Story is the universal language of humanity. In every language and culture, we all love a good story. And so we're going to try to tell the story of a volunteer this morning. Every good story contains tension or fear, and this is where ours begins. One thing that the worship team would love to tell you is that we are just as scared as you are. Whoa, there it is. We're just as scared as you are. Anybody surprised by that? I know we may look confident, and we look like we know exactly what we're doing up here, but if you could see behind that, you would often see nervousness and even fear. We know better than anyone else that we don't always know what we're doing. We feel our inadequacies deeply, and we definitely feel all your eyes staring at us, just like they are right now. All your eyes are staring at me. Something strange sometimes happens when you step on a stage or you volunteer to serve somewhere. People can begin to see you differently. They start to see you maybe as more special, more gifted, more talented, more spiritual, or more something than they are. For the adults in the room, do you remember the first time you were somewhere and you realized that you were the adult in the room? Now, we all had that moment where, we're the kid in the room, we're the young adult in the room, we're the teenager in the room. There's always someone to go to, someone to defer to. And then there comes this moment as an adult where we're standing there and someone says, "What are we going to do?" And we all look around for the adult, and then we go, "Oh, wait a second. I'm the adult." Any parents had that happen? Your kids come and say, "What are we going to do, Mom? What are we going to do about this?" And you're like, "Well, let's ask Mom. I'm Mom. What are we going to do?" You didn't feel the change happening, but it happened. And sometimes you feel kind of caught in this tension between the inner fear or inadequacy that you feel and the way you're now seen by others. Not always this happens, but sometimes it does. And there's something inside of you that sometimes wants to yell, "But I'm afraid. I'm not special. I'm not the adult. And maybe one day you'll find that out about me." I want you to work on an imagination game with me for a minute here. So imagine yourself for a minute standing on this stage with the bright lights in your eyes and a few hundred pairs of eyes on you. Then put a microphone in your hand or an instrument. How does that feel? Or I want you to imagine yourself standing in a brightly colored room full of toys, with an adult holding a baby across from you, and they're about to hand you their most precious possession in the world for you to care for, protect, and show the love of Jesus to for the next hour. Or I want you to imagine standing in front of children or teenagers or standing at our front door to greet everyone who comes in, and it's your job to help them encounter Christ. Sometimes by putting yourself in that place, you can see it a little more clearly. And all I'm trying to say is that all of our volunteers, out of all of them, none of them feel any more capable than you do. We're all just as scared as you to do the things that we do. Paul talked about this a little earlier in the letters to the Corinthian church. In chapter 2, he says, "You'll remember, friends, that when I first came to you to let you in on God's master stroke, I didn't try to impress you with polished speeches and the latest philosophy. I deliberately kept it plain and simple. First Jesus and who he is, and then Jesus and what he did, Jesus crucified. I was unsure of how to go about this, and I felt totally inadequate. I was scared to death, if you want the truth of it. And so nothing I said could have impressed you or anyone else." I love his honesty. I was scared to death. Paul was a giant of faith in God's story. He's one who did more to further the message of Jesus than anyone else in his day. But he was very open and clear about his fear and inadequacies. And there are many more volunteers in the Bible who are very clear about this. There's Gideon in the wine press. He was hiding. That's a little bit showing of fear. Mary, Jesus' mother. She was like, why me? Esther, Moses. Almost every great story in the Bible also contains an element of human fear and inadequacy. So when our teams get up here on Sunday, I want you to remember that we are just as scared to serve as you are. We want you to know that we don't know everything. We're not worship experts. We're not even musical experts. Most of us get up here with some form of nervousness and a feeling of inadequacy. I know I do every single time. We practice on Thursday nights. So I'll come. I'll play the piano on Thursday night. The room is empty. It's fabulous. We have a ball. We play. We do our thing. And all that exists is this little square, right? Then Sunday morning comes. And for me, I don't know what happens, but we get up here on Sunday morning to practice, and it's all fine. And then the room starts to fill up. And every single time we start to play, it's suddenly like I forgot everything that we ever just did. And I don't know what it is. It's like this nerves thing that I deal with. And we all feel that way. It happens to every single one of us. So when we're up here, please smile at us. Please sing with us and participate as much as you're able. Thank the people who hand you your bulletin or who love on your kids. Smile at them and realize they're just people like you, and they're probably not feeling as confident as they may appear. I'm going to have a little bit of help with my talk this morning, which I'm excited about. I've asked a few of my worship leaders to come up and help me with this. And one of our leaders I have seen grow in this area like I would never believe over the last few years, and that's Carly. And so I've asked her to come up and share a little bit of her journey with us. So let's welcome her as she comes.
Hi, just as scared as you are. So I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about some of my fears and how God has helped me to begin on the journey to growth in this area and overcoming. I haven't actually got on that other side yet, but I'm on my way. So for myself, in the beginning part of my journey, have really had to see the difference between being perfect and being made perfect. They're very, very different, even though they sound really close to the same thing. I truly have a need in my life, and it's a very human need that is kind of ugly, but to feel safe all the time. So this safety can be thrown off kilter in my life by many things, such as perceived judgment or the vice of false expectations from whoever may be around me. I have always felt that the safest way to be is to look like I have it all together. As long as I look like I have it all together, then I must have it all together. It's like one of those, a child when they are sitting with their eyes closed and you can't see me, but really everybody can see you. That's kind of how that worked for me. I thought I had everybody fooled, but it turns out that when I did this, I wasn't only shutting other people out, but I in turn shut out God's ability to work authentically in my life. So this was a wall that I had carefully built, one brick at a time, using mortar and carefully lining them up perfectly until one day I realized that I couldn't see over it. And my need to be perfect, instead of allowing God to make me perfect through the death of his son, had driven a wedge between God and me and everyone else around me and me. So to face this fear was a little difficult, to say the least. It did not take one day to build my wall, so obviously it did not take one day to take it down. In fact, it's not down yet. There have been times where I take this piece of wall down or I hammer this part of my wall and then I feel exposed. So I grab my bricks and start building my wall again and patch it back up so it looks perfect. And so in those moments, I'm really grateful for a loving and gracious and merciful Father who loves me anyway. In 2 Timothy 1:7, it says, God did not give us a spirit of fear, but rather he gave us a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline. I've always been a, what does that look like kind of person. I kind of need things laid out for me in patterns or very perfectly, like step by step. So when I started to focus on overcoming the fear of being vulnerable or allowing people to see me, I needed steps. So God gave me steps. Power, love, self-discipline. So I sensed that we were starting on this journey by overcoming when I read this scripture, and because it's his power, it's not my power that can help me overcome my fears. And it's his love and showing his love. He says in 1 John 4:18 and 19 that there is no room in love for fear. Well-formed love banishes fear. Since fear is crippling, a fearful life, fear of death, fear of judgment, is one not yet fully formed in love. We, though, are going to love and be loved. First we were loved, and now we love, because he loved us first. So I'm choosing love. And I must be aware of my tendency to be afraid to be able to use self-discipline to actually overcome. So that is the last one. Use self-discipline to overcome. I know that it is extremely necessary to begin this journey and to serve, just to serve in the worship ministry specifically, because that's, again, where I serve as well, effectively. I used to be scared all of the time to show my emotions on this stage. And now I see it as an essential part of my worship to God and service to you through this ministry. I do not always succeed or hit the mark. I still have a tendency to become overcome by my fear and build up that wall once again, but ultimately, you guys probably can tell when that happens. It's important for me to see it not as a destination that I'm ever actually going to reach, but part of a journey that I walk hand in hand with my Savior in daily. And as I do so, I will eliminate one brick at a time from my wall.
Thank you. Thank you, Carly. I can't turn this off. There we go. Nope. Forget it. So, personal story matters. And yeah, Carly's grown so much in that area, and I'm just so proud of her. This leads us to the next part of our story. If every character or volunteer is afraid, then why do they act? Why do we pick up our instrument or our microphone? Why do we turn a few more sound dials, wrap a few more newcomer gifts? Why do we bother to put ourselves through the tension? Have you ever asked yourself that as a volunteer? Why am I doing this? I think we've all asked ourselves that question. But it's for one reason and one reason alone. We long for you to encounter Jesus. That's the only reason anyone who volunteers in this church volunteers, because we want you to encounter Jesus. We've encountered him ourselves, and we long for every single person around us to encounter him for themselves. Our only goal up here as a worship team, this is a goal we talk about quite a bit, it's to create an atmosphere for encounters with Jesus. That's it. That's the only reason we come up here. This longing goes so deep in us, so deep that it pushes us to shove aside our fear and our feeling of inadequacy and get up here week after week after week. Have you ever felt like you wanted something really, really, really badly? Or something you deeply, deeply believed in, that if someone cut you, that's what you would bleed? That's how we feel about this. King David in the Bible knew this feeling. He said in Psalm 34, 8 and 9, "Open your mouth and taste. Open your eyes and see how good God is. Blessed are you who run to him. Worship God if you want the best. Worship opens doors to all his goodness." I love that he puts taste and see in the same verse as worship, because I think worship is such a pathway to experiencing God. For me, I grew up in a Christian home, and I'm so thankful for that. And I could tell you about specific times in my life, and I could even take you to specific spots and places where I encountered Jesus. I don't know if you guys have this, but for me, God encounters me in physical spots. And I can go back to those spots, and there's always something special there about those spots. There's a church service that my dad took me to. There's the corner in my childhood bedroom where I used to sit and do my devotions. There's the bend in a river at the summer camp that my family attended every single year. There's a spot on the hardwood floor in our previous house here in Moose Jaw. And there's the sunroom floor in my current house. There's no furniture in that room, that's why. That's why it's the floor of that room. But these are places that are special to me because I've encountered Jesus there. I could also tell you stories of watching others encounter Jesus. There was my neighbor in Calgary. She came every single week for coffee and with her questions about God. She was Japanese. She'd married a Canadian. She was terribly, terribly homesick. And God miraculously helped us to meet each other and spend time together. And she'd come every week with questions. And eventually both her and her husband became Christians and started going to our church, which was such a cool story in itself. There's the parents in our former church. When I was the coach of the nursery, I ran the nursery there. They would bring their baby to the nursery and drop him off. And then they'd come back after church with tears streaming down their face because they'd encountered Jesus in the service, and there was no distraction of their babies to help to keep them from being able to hear God. If you ever, when parents with kids, whenever we have our kid with us, we're always kind of distracted. And that's why we have childcare and child services in our church, because we want our parents to be able to encounter Christ and our kids to be able to encounter Christ in child-appropriate ways. There's also the ones that God whispered to in worship, confirming a decision they'd made. There's a mom at school that I visited with and smiled at every morning, and months later, she told me that she was going through something terrible in her marriage, and that she purposely walked by me every single day because I'd smile at her and chat with her. And we didn't talk about God or any of those things, but God uses those moments. And these stories aren't specific to me. Every single one of us has these stories. Stories of encountering Jesus for ourselves and then helping others encounter him. And this is why so many of us volunteer here week after week, simply for the joy of seeing you encounter Jesus for yourself. So I want to tell you what this has looked like on our team in the last few years. About 3 years ago, we started to work really hard towards creating an environment where all of us could encounter Jesus better together on Sunday morning. We don't see this, us and you. It's like we're all here in this room to encounter Jesus, and that's why we're here. So we began to pray for encounters as a worship team. But we also started doing some more practical things. We pulled all our worship leaders together. We have 5 of them. And we created a leadership team that meets once a month. And I can tell you that has become one of the highlights for all of us of our month. We pulled all our volunteers together, and we formed 2 solid teams where everyone could serve in community and relationship. Relationships matter, and we wanted to be able to deepen our relationships and serve more fully together as a team. We added a small group time to our practices so we could support and pray for one another, not just do music. We started praying with the other ministries in our church family on Sunday mornings together. Then we realized that our selection of music was far too broad for anyone to learn well. When you joined our worship team about 3 or 4 years ago, you would have been given a binder that looked like this. So we went through all of it and we cut it down to a top 40 list of songs. That doesn't mean that those are the only ones we sing, but those are the main ones we sing. And the only reason we did that was so that all of us and you, could learn all the words and sing together. Having everyone in this room sing and participate in worship is a massive priority and goal for us as a team. And then our leaders also started working on leading people and not just music. I don't know if you've noticed, but they've begun to experiment with talking more and sharing more with you as we do worship together. And I can tell you that as a worship team, we have been absolutely blown away by the results of what God has done through a few simple little practical things. Our leaders love and support each other and work together really well. Our team relationships have deepened, and there's a whole new sense of team on our team. Our musicians know our music better, and so they're able to more worship as they play instead of concentrate on what they're playing. And you sing. I can't tell you how much it means to us that you guys sing. I remember the very first time I was on stage when the singing from you was louder than the music from here. I completely lost my spot. I don't even know what we were singing. But I remember thinking, I don't know what to play next. I have no idea what I'm playing next. They're singing! I started to cry. I looked over at the team, and we were all like, that feeling of, wow, it's working. And that happens to me every single time. So do it to me often. There's nothing like that feeling of all of us together as a team, you and us, singing together and lifting praise to our great God with one loud voice. And every time it happens, I feel deep thankfulness and that everything is worthwhile that we do. We encounter Jesus together in those moments, and those are the moments that I live for. The only reason we do any of this up here is to create an atmosphere where you can encounter Jesus, and you've been helping us with that, and so thank you. And please keep helping us with that. Okay, on to the last part of our story is simply this. There's nothing like the sweet spot. Who knows what a sweet spot is? Any tennis players, badminton players, racket type sports? Nobody. One racket player. Okay, let me explain it to you. A sweet spot on a tennis racket, or any kind of racket, is that spot on the racket that will hit the perfect shot. You know as soon as you hit the ball. It connects with the sweet spot and it sends a perfect shot over the net. It has this satisfying thwack that goes with it. And we are all wired by God individually with a sweet spot. 1 Corinthians 12 is clear about that. Verse 7 says, each person is given something to do that shows who God is. Verse 18 says, as it is, we see that God has carefully placed each part of the body right where he wanted it to be. I love that God uses the picture of the body because there's so many unique and different parts. And that's who we are. If you look around the room, we are all very unique and very different. And God designed and wired each of us in a unique way to serve him and to bring him great glory. And so therefore, it's our job to find it and use it. Sometimes some things just have to get done. I don't know if you've heard Pastor Dan say this, but he often says, it's no one's sweet spot to take out the garbage. He tells our kids that all the time. It's no one's sweet spot to clean the toilet. Sometimes those things just have to get done. But when the thing you love to do and the ability to serve God with it collide, that's where your sweet spot is. There's nothing like that feeling. Another one of our worship leaders has been on this journey, this sweet spot journey, over the last few months, and it's been really fun to watch. So I've asked her to come and tell us about it. Please welcome Melissa.
Hello, I'm Melissa Donaldson. I'm a worshiper and bass guitarist on our worship team, and a normal person, just like you guys. A year ago, I would have laughed if you told me that I'd be working in my sweet spot now. But here I am. I started over a year ago working overnights at 7-Eleven, which is nobody's sweet spot. I was tired, I was depressed, and I clung to God because I felt if I didn't cling to him, I would die. It was one of those moments. And I'm going to just read part of my journal during that season in my life. I've never been so tired. It has been a long 5 months of victory and 5 months of heartache. I wish God would just tell me it's over. It's a funny thing what happens when your brain and body haven't had much sleep. They go into survival mode. Nothing else seems to matter, but you start to see problems where there aren't problems, and then you start to make problems. I guess that's my story. I'm a woman that has nothing, and I'm working at a job at 7-Eleven so I can just live. Then, a month later after I wrote that, Pastor Dan, and actually many of the people here in this room, came to me and said, there's an admin job at Riverside Mission. And I said, that's my dream job. Now, Riverside Mission, if you don't know, is a homeless men's shelter and soup kitchen here in Moose Jaw. And I've actually been volunteering with a group from our church once a month there. And so the minute I heard about it, I applied. And the next day, our church was serving at Riverside. So I went down and I introduced myself to Scott, the director there. And so we sat down for an interview. And we started the interview and it was going okay. And then Scott had to leave for a moment. And the minute he left, I started looking around. And on the bulletin board was this sheet of paper. And I'd like to read it to you. It's a prayer that a man wrote for Scott when he took over as director. It says, Scott, may the Lord bless you as you serve him and the broken of our society. I pray you find joy in the midst of difficult situations that you will encounter. I pray that you see the Spirit's work unfold right before your eyes. I pray the finances flow freely without you having to pound on doors and experience the stress of shortfalls. I ask that God would fill Scott and Elsie, his wife, and the staff at the mission with your Holy Spirit and the joy and wisdom he provides. Then this last line stood out. Raise up exactly the right workers for this ministry. And as I read that last one, I said, God, if I'm not the right person, I don't want this job. So then he came back and we finished the interview and And he said he'd let me know in a couple days. Well, lo and behold, I got the job. And it's a job, he said, Scott actually said, the minute I walked in with my purple green or whatever color hair I had at the time, he said, I knew that you were the person for the job. And I thought, my neon hair, like I don't actually have neon today, but my neon hair, that's what I was most worried about for the interview. Was like, I don't have time to dye over the weird colored hair, right? So it's the first job that I've ever had that my neon hair, my personality, my gifts, and even weaknesses are being used by God. So from my neon hair to my wacky personality, I believe that this job at Riverside is me serving in my sweet spot. And I just pray for all of you to experience it, because there's nothing like it.
Thank you. It's been really cool for our team to walk with Melissa through that journey. And it has been just like that. It's been such a cool thing. I know half our team is crying right now because we know it's been a long journey, but it's been so cool to see God use her sweet spot in a way that brings him glory. And God wants that for all of us, every single one of us. So how do we find our sweet spot? Yes, good. So I know the first question then is, how do I find that? You know, that's something that's intrinsic in the heart of every single person. It's, I want that, but I don't know how to get it. And how do we get it? You know, the first thing is always prayer. God knows how he wired us, and he loves to show us if we'll just ask him. And the Bible is always the next thing. In Galatians 6:4-5 says, this is one of my favorite verses, make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you have been given, and then sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own life. And so to me, what this is saying is to study yourself. What turns your head? What makes you cry? What do you always notice in every situation? Do you notice the crying baby or the tired mom? Do you notice the busy toddler or the questioning teenager? Do you notice the misspelled words or the wrong grammar in the bulletin or on the screens? I know that's one I notice. Do you notice the crooked tablecloth and the empty creamer at the coffee table? Do you notice the newcomer that no one else seems to notice, or the lonely-looking person in the corner? Take note of everything that you notice, because it's a key to your wiring. Look for patterns to it. Also, ask those who know you well what you're passionate about. People who love you know what you're passionate about. If you asked my children what makes your mom cry, they would say 4 things. They would say people meeting Jesus. They would say needy and poor children being cared for. They would say excellent customer service. And they would say any kind of team. It's embarrassing, but if we are watching hockey on TV and they say sing for O Canada, and then they pan over the team while they're singing O Canada and they're all standing there together as a team, I cry every time. And it's like, it's silly, but that's just me, you know. Anything that's a team. What are yours? Those are my triggers. What are your triggers? Ask people you love, they'll know. Another one of the best ways to find your sweet spot is to try things. You know, we had this awesome Bible college professor who encouraged us to try every single area we could in the church at least once. And so we took him at his word, and I did that. I tried almost every area, and I'm so glad I did. You know, I have some funny stories from that. I have a story from the time I tried preschool ministry, which I actually loved, but I tried it, and I was one day, this is a funny story, but we met in a community center, and we had to set it up and tear it down every Sunday. This is in Calgary. And so I was behind a shelf, if you can believe. There's a tiny space between the shelf and the wall, and I was in there getting something when someone showed the guest speaker for that day into that room to use for a prayer room before service. In that moment, I had a few choices. I could go, hi, I'll just leave now. Or I could sit down and make myself quiet and wait patiently till he was done. If you know me well, did I pick A or B? B. I sat down on the floor against the wall in this little tiny spot, and I sat there for about 30 minutes while he did whatever he did, getting ready for the service, prayed and got ready. And when I finally got out of there and snuck into church had already started and everything. He left a little bit after service had started, and Pastor Dan was like, "I've been looking for you everywhere." And I was like, "You would not believe where I have been." But I learned I loved preschoolers. I also learned I love babies. I learned I love team. And I also learned that I get really, really angry at the media computer. And so you won't find me back there. That's why I had my son make the PowerPoint. We also actually have a really great thing in our church. It's called a first serve. It's designed exactly for this reason. It gives you the opportunity to try serving in an area of the church without any commitment. It's a chance to just give it a try. And all you have to do is put it on a communication card or ask the leader of that ministry if you can do a first serve, and they'll set you up. And you're not committing to it. You're just saying, "I want to try it out." And so try everything. Try stuff. Try everything at least once. And that's how you'll know if you like it or not. Because there's truly no feeling that compares to the sweet spot of serving Jesus and others in a way that you love and are wired for. The volunteers of our worship team have found their spot up here on the stage. And we long for each and every one of you to find your own sweet spot. Whether it's serving with the homeless, singing, working with the babies, hiding behind a shelf in the preschool ministry. Whatever it is, find your sweet spot. Do whatever it takes, because there's nothing like that feeling. And so this brings us to the end of our story. It's been a story of fear, of deep longing for God encounters, and the joy of the sweet spot. And these are the things that our worship team would love to tell you. So I'd ask you to stand with me now, and our worship team's going to come. And I want to leave you with just a few questions to think about. You know, some of you have felt the fear, and you've allowed it to keep you in your seat. You've believed that those who serve are more gifted or spiritual than you, and you've allowed it to be an excuse. I believe God's poking some of you in this area, and he's daring you to step out and let him show you what he has for you to do for him. Our body is not complete without you. Some of you have gotten so busy serving that you've forgotten that the encounters with Jesus are the point. You've stopped encountering Jesus for yourself, and your volunteering has become all about getting the job done. And if you're honest with yourself, you feel some anger or resentment about what you do. I believe God's calling you back to himself. He longs for you to encounter him again. And only then can you help others encounter him as you serve, and our body is not complete without you either. And finally, some of you need to find or rediscover your sweet spot. You need God to open your eyes and help you to find what you love and are passionate about. You need better focus, and you need a sense of purpose. And others of you have found your sweet spot, but you use it everywhere except for God. You use it for work, or you use it with your family, but maybe you have never even thought of using it for God, or you've chosen not to for whatever reason. Again, our body is not complete without you either. We need every single one of you.